Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's kick off today's video with a story about getting even, but with a twist. So be nice to people, especially those serving you, because you never know when you'll be on the receiving end. Revenge on a client who tried to throw me under the bus. I was pushing 40 and I'd learned a lot of lessons in more than 10 years of legal practice, but one of the most important lessons I learned was from an older lawyer that I worked for as a summer student after the second year of law school. A lawyer has 3 duties. He told me first to himself, second to the court, and last the client. Always make sure you come first and the client comes last. The reason? Because clients will F you, he said. They'll throw you under the bus without thinking twice. I should have stayed with this lawyer, but being young and an idiot, I had to go work downtown, and I'm still downtown now. But fortunately for me, I remembered this lesson, and it came in handy many years later when a client really did try to throw me under the bus. My client was this mid-sized company that did this and that, known things here and there. Not big enough to be listed, but it did have a pretty sizable real estate portfolio. And one day, a building they owned burned to the ground. The company wanted to collect on the insurance, so they told Frank, a veteran salaryman, to deal with it. Frank was close to 60 and thought he knew what he was doing. He didn't need me to help him with the insurance claim, he told me. He had everything under control. Besides, lawyers are expensive. Some guys really get off on not paying legal fees, and Frank was one of those guys who gloated over every penny that he managed not to pay to the lawyers. I dealt with Frank a lot, and he was always nickel and diming me. The insurer's gonna F you, I told Frank. It was only by luck that I even knew about the fire and the loss because Frank had not asked for my help. He just let it slip one day, and since then I'd kept on top of him, trying to get him to smarten up. I'd had to fight to get him to send me the proof of loss form to make sure he hadn't messed that up. Frank effed up a lot, and I wondered sometimes how he had a job. But the proof of loss was okay at least, so that was one less thing to worry about. You don't know that, he said. I could tell he just wanted to get me off the phone. I'm paid to know when insurers are trying to screw my clients, I said, and the insurer is going to screw you. They've been stringing you along for ages with requests and questions and paperwork, but they aren't going to pay you. Not unless you sue them. But Frank said he knew what he was doing, that it was all under control. And besides, he got along with the adjuster so great. The limitation period expires in 2 weeks, I said, and once that 2 weeks pass, it'll be too late to sue. The moment that limitation period expires, they'll stop taking your calls, you'll get a final email saying, sorry, you're out of time, and that'll be that. Don't leave this till the last minute. Let me sue right now and you'll have the money in no time. Frank was like, sure, fine, whatever, don't bother me, I got this, blah, 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 and he got off the phone as soon as he could. I sent him the usual email with clear warnings and recommendations, which he ignored. I sent the email again, and then again as the limitation period approached, and again a couple of days before the deadline. I'm going to be at trial and you won't be able to reach me, my final email said, but you'll have to sue. You have other firms on your list, so pick one and sue. He didn't bother to reply, and I went off to do my trial. The trial lasted a couple of weeks and no email from Frank. Then a month passed, and another month, still no email. I figured he must have sorted things out. Maybe Frank was right after all, I said to myself, and then my phone rang. It was Frank. Remember that fire insurance thing we spoke about? We'd only spoken about it like a dozen times. I figured he was calling up to gloat, so I cut to the chase. So they paid out. That's great, Frank. You were right. He asked me what I was talking about, and could he see a copy of the claim? What claim, I said. The claim against the insurer. You know, that claim. Does that mean the insurer didn't pay, I said? He hung up on me, and then a few minutes later, my computer dinged, and there was Frank's email talking about how we spoke, and he told me to sue, and he was worried when I hadn't sent him a copy of the claim, so he was following up to get a copy of the claim. I emailed him back. I take it that the insurer didn't pay you, just like I told you they wouldn't. And now that the limitation period is expired, they told you to jump in the lake, leaving you with a loss in the millions. Is that it? I'd made a mistake by not going over Frank's head when he wouldn't listen to me. But if I'd gone over Frank's head, I never would have received another file from him, so I didn't. But that was then and this is now. So I CC'd Frank's boss and his boss's boss, plus I CC'd Bill, the client's in-house counsel. Bill acknowledged my email right away and called me later that day. Frank messed up, he said. We know that. He's an idiot. So what do we do? So his excuses didn't work? Nope, Bill explained, but they'd summoned Frank to a boardroom, but his story didn't add up, given all the warnings I'd sent him. Besides, there would have been no reason for him to keep emailing the insurer if he'd told me to sue. Once the file goes to legal counsel, Frank's role was over. The company knew Frank was bullcrapping them. So that's it then, Bill said. We just lost a couple of $1 million bucks. It's okay, I said, explaining that when I realized that Frank was going to F up, I issued a claim against the insurer because I'd made Frank send me the proof of loss a while earlier. I had enough information that I could sue to preserve the cause of action. Not a great claim and short on details, but good enough. You sued without instructions, Bill said. Lawyers aren't supposed to sue without instructions, because if you do that, you're personally liable for whatever cost the other side incurs. It's a big deal to sue without instructions. Yep, I said I sued without instructions. I pulled up a copy of the claim and emailed it to him as we spoke. It's a little rough, I said, but we can always amend. Thank God, Bill said. Can I leave it with you? Of course he could. The insurer was a sitting duck, and I knew I'd collect from them, no problem. A few days later, I got a call from another guy who worked for the client, a guy I didn't normally deal with. They had a situation and needed my help. I usually deal with Frank, I said. What's up? What was up was that Frank got called into another meeting, and they handed him a one-page letter, and then he put his little office things in a box, and security walked him past his coworkers to the elevator and escorted him downstairs to the parking lot. Bye-bye, Frank. It was a life-changing event for Frank, but for me, he was just an anecdote. A cautionary tale that I tell young lawyers, sometimes over beers, maybe too often because I'm getting on in years and I have my favorite stories. I wasn't trying to get revenge on Frank. Not at all. I would have felt a bit sorry for him if he hadn't been trying to throw me under the bus. But the guy who replaced him was great and never nickel and dimed me, so it was all good. It wasn't even his own money, but the company who'd be paying the lawyer. And he was that cheap? Weird hill to die on. And our second story. Don't waste your time? Okay, I won't. I work for a large store that sells many different kinds of construction materials. The other day I had a very impatient woman that insisted that she could buy a few items out of a box that's always sold by the box and never individually. She originally asked a fairly new coworker of mine if she could buy them individually, to which he responded with, "I'm not sure, let me ask my coworker." This is fairly standard for new employees, of course, except the moment he turned his back to her, she took the few she had in her hands and began to leave. I told him that we do not, in fact, sell them individually, so he called her back to him to inform her of this. We led her back over to the products to see if we could help her find something that she could buy individually, when the woman pointed at the boxes she had taken the items out of and said, "Well, these ones are open, so people must buy them individually all the time." Of course, there were none actually missing from the boxes except the one she took out. It was just damaged packaging on the others. I was trying to explain that they wouldn't let her pay for the items as they were out of the package, but I was cut off by, well, the boxes are open, so people buy them individually. So I'm buying them individually. Don't waste my time. I warned her once again that she wouldn't be allowed to purchase the items, but she ignored me and kept walking, so I pulled out my work phone and called my cashier manager. I quickly told her that I had a woman coming up to the front of the store with a few items that were taken out of their packaging and could not be sold to her. From what I understand, the moment she got to the cash registers, they were telling her she wasn't going to be able to pay for the items she wanted, and the woman started screaming at the cashiers, but stormed out pretty quickly when she realized she wasn't going to get her way. In the end, I gave her what she wanted. I bet she's never been told no as quickly as she was that day. I was just glad I could help her speed up the process. What the heck was the item? The suspense is killing me, and I feel like, depending on what it is, could make this story even greater. And our last story. Fake HOA sues me. So there we were, my wife and I completely anti-HOA because, let's be honest, who needs a group of neighborhood Karens telling you your mailbox is the wrong shade of gray? We buy this house, right? And we're thinking, yes, freedom. Little did we know we were about to get a crash course in the school of fake HOAs taught by none other than the self-appointed president of Busybodyville herself. Week 1 in our new pad, and there's a knock at the door. It's the neighbor from behind our house claiming she's the president of the HOA. My wife and I exchange that look, you know. This woman starts welcoming us to the neighborhood and all that jazz, and we're politely nodding while internally screaming, "Abort mission." Now, our property has this weird Bermuda Triangle of land out front, which we're told belongs to the HOA. More like NOA, am I right? Everything's peachy until we deal with this massive tree limb threatening to reenact the scene from The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy gets a free flight. We hire an arborist, do the responsible thing, yada yada, and end up with a bunch of wood rounds. Then enter the shrieking harpy stage left. She rolls up like she's auditioning for Fast and Furious suburban driveway drift and starts screeching at my wife about moving the wood. My wife, bless her, tries to explain, but Harpy's not having it, so my wife ends up moving this wood that's basically the size of small cars because, you know, we're apparently in the business of performing miracles now. I try to have a chat with the Harpy about the wood situation, but she's dodging me like I'm trying to serve her court papers. This leads me down a rabbit hole trying to figure out who really owns the Triangle of Mystery Land. Turns out it's part of the road or something, basically public land, and the HOA, as real as my chances of winning Dancing with the Stars. So I hatch a plan. I send out letters to the entire HOA, basically giving them the scoop on their missing HOA fees, courtesy of the Harpies Imaginary Association. It's like Oprah's favorite things. You get a revelation, and you get a revelation. Neighbors went full John Wick on her in court, except instead of guns, they used lawsuits. They win, the fake HOA dissolves, and justice is served with a side of, "I told you so." But wait, there's more. Harpy tries to sue us for defamation or something equally ridiculous. My lawyer basically dances circles around her in court, and we get a restraining order because, at this point, why not add some legal flair to this circus? This saga had more twists than a season of Game of Thrones, from IRS raids and divorce dramas to her being tased by cops on my lawn because she decided a drunken rant was the way to go. Oh, and did I mention the foreclosure on her house? Yeah, it turns out karma has a longer memory than an elephant. In the end, we learned valuable lessons. Always check for HOAs, even the fake ones. Wood rounds are not worth moving under duress, and never, under any circumstances, underestimate the power of community and a few well-timed legal moves. Also, I'm pretty sure we're now the neighborhood legends, which I'm adding to my resume under special skills. Dealing with a fake HOA and a neighbor from nowhere near Sanity Land, you've had quite the adventure. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.